stress is what grows us. Stress is what teaches us things. Stress is what helps us build our capacity to go.
The more I can understand of how I work, the more I'll understand as to how I can work everything else. Our mind can do fascinating, amazing things, but realizing as well is that our mind is motivated by how our body's working.
This is The Energetic Leader, led by a team of 3 who have influenced people at the highest level of corporate, athletic, entrepreneur, and the business world. We teach through science and data-driven methods to help you lead through energy and influence. We don't just use our stories, but the stories of those who have walked the walk, been in your shoes, and ultimately excelled. Whether it's leading a team of 10 or 10,000, building a business of 1 million or 100 million, winning 1 championship or 10, they all have one thing in common: energetic leadership. So with that, step inside and let's help transform you into that energetic leader.
Welcome back to another week of the Coaches Council, and coming to you from sunny California in a hotel room with a Peloton. And that's when you know you have officially hit the quarantine low. When you now have Pelotons in hotel rooms. Tough one. But Pradeep, as always, great to see you. I know things are still locked down up in Canada, but obviously we're more free to roam down here.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's nice and sunny here too, but it's definitely not as warm, that's for sure.
So guys, we're super excited to bring on today's guest. If you are at all familiar with Jim Kwik's work on brain mastery and the way in which you think, the way in which you can recall information, the way in which you can actually prevent forgetfulness and read quicker, understand things more, and get deeper into the thoughtfulness in the way in which you produce things, you will not want to miss this, because we have coming from over the pond Ciaran Fox, who has been a brain coach for a multitude of years and doing really impactful work, and has been so gracious enough to bring his knowledge and tidbits to us today. So Ciaran, so grateful for you for spending the time with us and taking a moment to share everything that you have learned about understanding brain, optimizing stress, and ultimately achieving the level of success that people are looking for.
Absolutely. First of all, gents, thank you for having me onto the podcast. Any excuse to talk about this conversation of brain, body, mind, and how they connect together and where that comes from. And to come back and give you a little bit of a background before I deep dive into going through a little bit more of the explaining, and I'd love to hear a little bit of your guys' questions as well, is I realized a lot of the space when it came to mindset. For myself, I struggled to believe in mindset. I struggled to believe in the conversation of mindset. And that came from a place of not being able to track the process. And when we hear about the sexy marketing words that typically go with, mindset conversation, gratitude and consistency and control and confidence, all these big heavy hitters, for myself, innately, I was very sporty. I performed at a high level in sport when I was in Ireland, and weightlifting when I was in university. And for myself, realizing that a lot of my conversation with high performance came from a level of stress. Now, that conversation of stress came from a professional standard in terms of education. I mean, I basically failed my way through university until things started to really pick up and work for myself. But it was the same in any of my performance conversations as well when I was playing team sports or individual sports. Now, when I got to a deeper level of awareness as to where that was coming from, I realized I was operating on an acute level of stress, or not so much an acute level of stress, but a level of stress every single day that was affecting my intelligence, affecting my ability to sustain relationships, affecting my ability to sustain a good relationship with myself, to create that confidence within myself, to step out of myself, to create that consistency to really see where things are going, paint a vision, follow a path, and achieve goals. And finally, to be able to manage my emotions, which I really struggle with. If I was to be completely honest, I really struggle with managing my emotions and getting drawn into situations. And for myself to understand this, again, coming from my own education, I worked and studied as an occupational therapist. So physiotherapy to the body, occupational therapist to the mind. And what I was really fascinated with was brain injuries. brain injury and stroke specifically. And I specialized in that. I became a specialist in this after I graduated for a number of years. And I realized that the model that we were working off, from getting people from suboptimal to functional level, I could re-engineer that whole process, and in terms of my own learning and understandings, and get people from a level of high functioning to an optimized, sustainable high performance. And what that really meant was understanding a lot more of our story, understanding a lot more of the unsexy conversation, and how to track the process of that unsexy conversation, that conversation that makes us feel all very uncomfortable, your own innate anxieties, but how to bring that up into a pragmatic level where you can action a lot of that awareness and that learning, so you can step forward with 3 pillars that I cover specifically: confidence, consistency, and control. And when we take that conversation, well, yeah, of course, we're going to hit all of the sexy conversation Jim Quick touches on, which is memory, mood, and focus. And I work with it in a few different areas to help optimize that, but almost coming back to that core foundation of understanding a lot of our own story.
Now, I'm so curious about bringing it back to like your own story and understanding who you are and understanding the way in which your brain works. And for anybody, I think the misconception or the disconnect is oftentimes that we really don't know who we are, or we really haven't spent the time to bring that level of awareness to understand what's gone on in our life, or what we've been through, or the successes that we've seen, or the failures that we've also felt, and the lessons that we've brought from it. And so what is kind of the starting point that you take people through, Ciarán, and are able to make that level of awareness heightened on these people in a positive way that lead to further progressive steps?
100%, and great question as well, Justin. I work with predominantly a lot of males, and realizing a lot of, and another conversation I'm fascinated in is motivation, how people are motivated and why we're motivated. And beyond people, male and female, and looking at males specifically, how we're motivated is to solve problems. So for ourselves to be able to solve our own problem is to understand the process of solving problems. So when anyone typically works with myself, I'll go through and teach them how to start to realize, first of all, that there are, and maybe problems is the wrong word to use, but there are stories that we want to understand more of. And when we can apply a problem-solving strategy to that, now we have motivation to understand more of that. So when it comes to simply, I've had people who are business owners, who are CEOs, who are top athletes, who are hypercritical thinkers that work in high performance spaces, and they want to understand how they can get more out of themselves. How do I do that? Where does that start? And it comes back to a level of awareness to precede that action. How we cultivate that level of awareness is put it into some form of practice for that person to carry out. So when we think about these difficult things, when it comes to my story, or when it comes to, I don't know who I am, or I want to understand more of who I am, our physiology will react in such a way if I'm just to sit and talk about this. So it's going to stress me out. I'm going to feel a little anxious and awkward. I'm not going to really understand how I can use this. So we want to make sure that with any thinking problems, I cannot think my way out of a doing problem. So I must do my way out of that thinking problem. So I must take action on that problem. So now that we've affiliated our motivation with, I need to do something about this conversation. I can't just talk about it. I need to action it. Now we can talk about the practices that you might do. And some of the practices that I work with is cold therapy or cold shower practice. So uncertainty training or acute stress training, some form of focus training. What I mean by that is orientating our attention and how we focus our attention, using the likes of journal writing, or more so the ability to critically ask yourself questions to get a certain answer to help facilitate that journey for yourself. And then finally, exercise. And between these different 4 modalities that we work through in practice, well, now we can get into the nitty-gritty of why we might struggle with consistency, why we might struggle with the ability to control our emotions, or how to step into that real confidence, not that ego-based confidence, but that inner understanding of why I'm doing what I'm doing, and the confidence to be able to dance with uncertain situations without questioning myself, because I understand who I am in this moment and how I can perform in this moment.
So you I brought up something really interesting that I thought was cool when you talked about problems and the process of solving problems, because I see that quite a bit. People are solving the wrong problems, or they're solving surface level problems when it's not deep enough. How do you help people uncover those challenges, those real root challenges, or the problems that they should be tackling rather than the ones that they're actually tackling?
Beautiful, and a great question as well. First of all, where my thinking goes to, and when working with anyone, is how can I create more connections? How can I create more images here? And again, my understanding will always come from that neurological brain perspective, and then I'll work my way out the way. So my understanding goes to, well, how can I help that person create more images in their head? Again, when it comes to our brain and comes to our senses, 30% of our brain in terms of our senses is based on vision. So it makes sense if we can see more visually, if I can imagine and see more of what's going on, well, I'll be able to track and connect from where I am in that surface level when I'm swimming at the easy parts in the water for when I want to deep dive further down. And realizing that when we can see that image, when I can track that process, it makes a lot of sense why a lot of people may struggle to understand what is more of my why, what is my core motivations, what's my reason for doing these things, why do I struggle with these things. And when we realize that, I'm not going to be a deep sea diver unless I practice what it means to get to that stage. I'm not going to deep dive 40, 50, 60 meters if I haven't done the work before that. It's the same thing if I was a power lifter and I wanted to, squat 200 kilos. You're not going to just go up and squat 200 kilos straight away if you've never, dude, you got to put in the reps. You got to build up to that process. So the same thing here when it comes to understanding more of those difficult situations or those difficult experiences, where a lot of that resistance ends up tagging onto us. And, one of my own mentors in one of our recent conversations referred to it as an ability to understand more of that mud. We all hold that mud, that form of trauma, that form of resistance that we just want to get rid of so we can start to shine more of our light, step more into our purpose, our ability to be of service and really step into our potential. Where that comes from is being able to track that process. So when I talk to people and clients, it's showing them a practice that they can start to get stuck into, something like an action. And then for themselves, as we start going through a lot more of the teachings of understanding how our brain works and understanding how brain and experience are very much linked together with our story, we can start to piece together the process. And before you know it, you've never deep dived before, but now you're able to deep dive. And more so than that, you're able to deep dive without someone else holding your hand. So a lot of what I teach is there's no point of you using my fishing rod. I need to show you how to make your own and build your own, because you might need a coach when you work with me, but afterwards you'll never need a coach, in that sense of understanding your own core self and how that then pertains to stepping into a higher level of performance as well.
I love that analogy because so often, and I come from the athletic space and really working with some, working in professional sports for 10 years. And it was really all about building capacity to handle stress. And stress, a lot of times in society, we see it as this negative. We see it as this thing that hurts us, that we want to be afraid of, that we want to shy away from. But in actuality, stress is what grows us. Stress is what teaches us things. Stress is what helps us build our capacity to go. And and so often when I say that to people, they're like, oh, I have the best ability to handle stress. I have more stress on me than you can ever imagine. But it's chronic stress. It's stress overload. It's constant stress from every way, shape, and form. And we haven't undulated or allowed that gap to really push and overreach, but then allow that time of super compensation where we rest, recover, and we come out of it. And that can be intermittent in time. We see life as a marathon where it's like this gaunt, like if you're watching on YouTube, I'm just doing like this little gaunt runner, just like slogging along. That's just literally just weak and tired and slow. And that's how you end up showing up in every way, shape, and form in your life. Versus the sprinter, when you are working at a 100, 200, 300, 400 meter pace, they're muscular, they're energetic, they're powerful. But guess what? That runner can see the finish line in every competition they're going for. And they're never running their full full duration, they're practicing parameters of it. They're practicing the power. They're stressing themselves for 6-7 seconds and resting for 4 or 5 minutes. And they're doing it periodically, and they're allowing that amount. They're overreaching. They're stressing themselves beyond what their comfort zone is, but then they're allowing for that super compensation phase to build. So they build that resiliency. They build that capacity to be able to do it over and over and over and over again and eventually handle more. So I love the example that you gave in terms of being able to slowly step into the tool, because whether the tool is the cold tub, whether it's the exercise, I forget the other two that you mentioned.
Journaling and then focus training as well.
And exactly, it's, you slowly push the envelope, but then you back off from it. It's not something you do constantly and you dive in all at once and you are constantly exercising, or you're constantly in the cold showers. But hey, maybe it's once a week and then you back off and you let yourself get back to it. And maybe it's twice a week, 3 times, and slowly add in the frequency, slowly add, make it a little bit colder than it was before. And slowly change those dynamics around that. So what do you notice often comes with the growth of an individual as they begin to implement some of these areas into their life in their ability to perform?
Yeah, and great question. And I think a lovely follow-up is, just to finish up on your own point before really stepping into that, is the conversation of stress. This conversation of stress innately, I think it's so important for all of us now. You know, we all love information. We're all information addicts. Especially dudes. Like, I realize a lot of, I just love problem solving. Like, we just always want I want to know the best new thing. Like, what's this biohacker saying? I want to know how he's doing it. Like, you know, how's the Ben Greenfields? What's he doing over there? Like, we're just fascinated by how people are doing things now. And as much as we're fascinated about the image of what we see, we must also focus on how we speak and understand these things. So the conversation of stress and exactly 100%. And where that comes from is, I'll take stress simply and realize that has a lot of baggage, that word. Like, if I say stress to any one of my clients that I'm working with, they're going to think, whoa, like, you know, work stresses me out, or my girlfriend stresses me out, or, you know, my family stresses me out. Like, I've got a lot of story I need to work against there. But instead, if I challenge you and say, instead of stress, we call it uncertainty. So now, already, instead of understanding stress as this big fuzzy knot that I just try to unwind to make sense of, we approach it logically. Because the second I think of when I'm stressed, yeah, maybe once or twice during the day, but when I think of the times I feel uncertain, whoa, okay, I can think of this moment and this moment and this moment. And suddenly what we do is, and what we really help to cultivate, is critical thinking on asking and answering instead of going in circles, so that I know, again, from that problem solving point of view, I'm seeing steps to the process. So I can ask myself, oh, what do I feel uncertain about? So example, if I'm using a cold therapy practice, oh, what do I feel uncertain about? I'm standing outside the cold shower, I'm freaking out a little bit, I want to understand a little bit more of my intention here. You know, it's cold, I've never had the cold before, cool. And then I step into that and I overcome that. Oh, I've created certainty here. Amazing, that's very interesting. And when we take that physiological experience and we start cultivating it with more of the psychology, we start to cultivate a lot more certainty with the uncertain situations. What we really start to do, and almost leading into your question as well, Justin, as to what people actually get from understanding this, is you get to actualize in yourself a state of certainty in whatever you do, which is massive power, because it takes away the difficulty and the scariness that our ego ends up being challenged by when I have fires to fight every day. You know, as a serial entrepreneur myself, running multiple businesses, there's fires all day long. That would freak me out if I didn't understand the conversation. I need to see how to address these things. And when we start addressing how we speak about these things and the words we use, and when we start using words that can help us to actively problem solve, well, we're going to create a lot more certainty. So when we take that word stress, I almost want to take that word stress, pull like a LeBron James on it. Let's throw that into let's hoop that and forget about it. And let's change that word to stress and turn that word into uncertainty. And now when I understand the word uncertainty and place meaning into that, well, now I can start to ask myself more logical questions, and I can go from a point of productive thinking where it's not just, you know, productivity, I need to manage myself in this situation and then I feel better. Oh, amazing, I've procrastinated. And then it comes to the next day and the same situation happens. The same thing happens. But the difference is now is with the certainty that we create, we start to see progress. So the lessons aren't repeated, the lessons are learned. And from there, people can start to access a lot more of their higher intelligence. And what I mean there is they can access more of the things they already know. If you're a business owner, if you're an athlete, if you're someone that has a lot of learning, but you just can't implement it and use it, what do you know? Now you can access a lot more of your intelligence. So what I've realized as well is, and coming back to your question, Justin, is certainty is what people end up achieving, and certainty is what they end up embodying. And what that then leads to, it's interesting, the nootropic company I work with, if I have the nootropic here, like Cognetics, it's a blend nootropic. Now, what I'm doing with these guys is I'm helping them make the first ever brain training program that's going to complement a nootropic. And their main focus is focus, memory, and mood. Now, these things are like very much the Jim Quick conversation of let's attack these specific modalities. What do you think underpins your cognition? Your feeling of safety. So if you don't feel certain, you're already operating on a level of uncertainty that's going to affect all of your cognition, all of your attention, all of your visual processing, all of your memory, all of your executive functioning, all of your putting together this stuff, your praxis, putting together the information. But we can't have that conversation unless you're operating out of a point of certainty. When we can operate out of a point of certainty, yeah, like the sky is your limit, because now you can access a lot of that potential, that mud that people don't realize is there. We need to be able to understand how to shift that and move that so we can step into the skills we already have and then direct that moving forward, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. And that's what I love about the application of everything is the moment that you're able to figure out how to apply it in your life, the moment you're able to have not just a tool, not just a nootropic, not just a cold tub, not just an exercise protocol or a meditation or journaling protocol, but a purpose as to why you're doing it, and bring the action and the awareness to that, it sticks a lot more. And so dive in a little bit deeper to the things that are kind of being thrown out there, the sexy things like improving your memory, for example. How do you improve your memory? How do you aim to reduce forgetfulness? That there's all these tricks. How do you read faster? How do you be able to pull more information in? Go to some of that sexiness, quote unquote, and deduce it down to something that's more applicable and something that's more action oriented for us.
100%. Great question as well. I love that. So take for the example of memory. For memory to improve, we need to understand how memory works in the most general sense. Now, memory is always going to be a secondary component of me being able to focus my attention somewhere. So imagine if I'm reading a book, how often are we actually reading a book? Are you reading the book, or are you thinking about like what, your other half is making for dinner, or, I got to meet this person at like 2:00. Like, are you reading the book? Like the majority of case, we're probably not reading the book. So a lot of the conversation comes back to when I want to improve memory, I need to improve my attention. Because if I don't take in the information, your hippocampus, that memory store that pushes that information all to the cortical areas of your brain, you're never going to be able to remember it. So a lot of the time and coming back to memory specifically, when people say, I've had people say, dude, my memory's terrible. It's like, dude, your memory's not terrible. Your attention sucks. Like it's an attention issue, not a memory issue. So for ourselves, when we take it back to that, what's before your attention? Grounding yourself, feeling safe, creating certainty. Because if I don't feel safe in this situation, or if I'm worried or stressed, or I'm thinking about a load of different things and I begin to feel anxious, like our body and brain is very smart. Like it auto-regulates very quickly. So the second that happens, unconsciously to me, thank you brainstem and limbic system, like my blood's going to get pushed to my amygdala, my fight and flight area. But we don't realize that a lot of that blood is taken away from the decision-making areas of my brain, my prefrontal cortex, that CEO. So already, if you want to improve anything, take it back to something really tangible. Ground yourself. Do some form of breath work. Help yourself identify what are those stress markers. Sometimes I breathe through my chest. I'm not getting enough oxygen in my body. I'm stressing out. My body is stressing out. My hands are super sticky and sweaty right now. My mouth is very dry. I'm forgetting my words. I'm jumbling myself up. I'm rambling a little, and I've forgotten what we were speaking about, and I just don't stop speaking. Or I speak really loud, and now I'm like, what's that guy doing? Or I fall into myself, and I'm I'm kind of stuck in my own, like understanding what is your stress indicators, what is your, and I use this as well, what's your golden ticket? Find your golden ticket. That, and that, I don't just mean like Justin's golden ticket. I mean, or everyone's golden ticket. I mean, like, what's Justin's golden ticket? Like, dude, what's your golden ticket? I don't care about anyone else's, because like, you're not going to be actioning anyone else's. You know, that's sexy and cool to look at what that person on Instagram is doing, but it's not you, dude. It's not you. So the more we understand our golden tickets, the more we can take that uncertainty, create that certainty, and then in that moment, I'm going to do some breath work. Yeah, because again, we want to work to what our brain works on, and always, whatever we do that agrees with our brain, it agrees with us. Amazing. So when it comes to like some memory, let's work on neuroplasticity. And what does that mean? For us to improve our memory, as an example, we need more days on than off. Now, consistency isn't every day. I'm not a robot. I'm sorry. I don't know about you guys, but like, there's some days of the week I'm just like, I'm going to stay in bed this morning. Cool. Amazing. So for us to create neurological changes, neuroplastic changes within those lovely neurons in our brain to start sticking together and wiring together, we need to have more days on than off. 7 days in the week. Cool, give me 4. And I know at least neurologically, we're progressing. So when it comes to any of these things, taking it back to ourselves very fundamentally is, the more I can understand of how I work, the more I'll understand as to how I can work everything else. And when it comes to that conversation of our brain, it puts us directly in that conversation of certainty and in that conversation of performance. But very simply, breathe more, some breath work before I do something, and identifying when my golden tickets are flaring up. What are my golden tickets? What is the indicators of my stress?
I got a question for you, because I think a lot of guys, especially, right, we like to think in our heads. And you talked about something earlier in this episode that I think was really important, right? Yet you talked about the mind and the body. So can you maybe talk to the audience in terms of the importance of the body when it comes to whether it's performance, memory, focus, because there's obviously a direct correlation there. And again, as a lot of guys, we just think it's in our heads. We don't have to worry about our bodies.
100%. And a really, really good question. I love that you asked that as well, because the process to it is, it is awesome when you have that process. And a lot of the issue, especially with us guys, like, we're problem solvers. If I don't have the answer, I'm going to forget about it because it doesn't make sense. I need to focus on the solutions. So when we don't have that solution, we just negate it and just assume, oh, cool, it's just what is. Like, that's just my head. It's just, you know, what can I do about it? So when we take it back to the process, the intangible, so the thing I can't see of my mind, you know, I'm here, but I can imagine myself on the moon. Now I'm on the moon. Amazing. So our mind can do fascinating, amazing things, but realizing as well is that our mind is motivated by how our body's working. So realizing a lot of the time that my higher level of thinking is motivated by my limbic system. So it's motivated by my feeling of either feeling certain or uncertain. And what that really means is feeling content in that moment or feeling a little bit anxious and worked up in that moment. So for ourselves, we need to also then take it back to, if this is our conscious awareness of who we are, what happens? Well, what happens below my awareness? So if you walk into a room and there's a lot of people just staring at you, what happens first? You might feel a bit socially awkward. Your stomach gets really tight. You get really anxious. So our body will react subconsciously for us. So our body is an image of our subconscious mind. And when it comes to pain, when it comes to any issues with, you know, stomach problems, digestive issues, all these things, this is our mind and body connection through our subconscious that show us these physical presentations. So the more as a human being, the more as we understand the connection between how my body reacts to different things and situations, and realize that connection right there, that's your subconscious mind. Right there and then, that's your subconscious mind. And the more we understand that and appreciate that, whoa, now I can start to impact my subconscious by bringing that up to my conscious state of awareness. And by doing that, I start to cultivate and create more of that connection with body. And I realize that gut-wrenching thing in my stomach, that anxiety that I always get in front of meeting people, it's not because like the situation per se, it's just of my reaction to body and my connection and my reaction to that. So what really happens in that moment when we're stressed or when I'm freaking out? Imagine, let's use that example of walking into a room of new people. We get a perception. So our body, it's attuned like a bell. You know, it attunes itself very, very easily to anything and anything we do. Like right now, I'm feeling nice and relaxed. I'm attuned. I'm vibrating at a certain frequency. I feel good, amazing, and you guys can feel that as well. We're all sitting here having this lovely conversation. Now, the second I change my tonality and I start saying something more direct, and I get a little bit more in your face, and I speak up and I start pointing. Whoa. You're going to feel a little bit intimidated and something's in your stomach. Cool. So that's a perception. So we're perceiving something here a little different as a result of a sensation, which is an example in my stomach. And what that does is that creates a connection with my brain. So I'm going to have a thought about this feeling in my stomach and think, whoa, what's going on here? Why is this happening? Why is this guy talking really crazy? We've just met him. He's like really in my face. And I'm going to start expressing an emotion on that. So now I'm going to say, oh, I don't really like that person. Or the example of walking into a new room. Ooh, that's a lot like that. I'm not good in social situations. I attach an emotion to that. And what we don't realize is that emotion will then attach to a certain belief that we end up having to ourselves, which goes below that subconscious in our everyday. We operate on a load of different beliefs. And for ourselves, when we start to realize that the key to unlocking this is through our body, well, we can start to unravel a lot of the story before of, I was that person who'd really struggled to walk into a social situation, and now I'm not. Why? Because I've retrained my brain's plasticity, my brain's ability to learn from this experience of mind and body, so that now I can direct it in the way and manner that I see fit. Amazing. So now I can access a lot more of those things that I want to do. I'm not operating on this old relationship of how my body works and how my mind then perceives how my body is reacting to these different situations.
It's so impactful because it's things that we can practically and applicably use every single day. And it truly makes a difference in the way in which we show up and the way in which we are able to perform. So, Ciarán, I can't thank you enough for the time and the actual tangible, applicable takeaways that we have here. Where can our audience find you? Where can they interact with you? Where can they get more information from you and kind of deep dive into this even at a greater level?
100%. You can get me on Instagram as my main platform at the moment. So the Mind Guy Official, all one word, all lowercase. You can get me on the mindguyofficial.com as well. We're actually redoing the website. We're making it very sexy. We've got a photo shoot tomorrow as well for that. So stay tuned for that. But Instagram on the Mind Guy Official, or on LinkedIn as well. You can get me at my name, Ciaran Fox, which will have a link to the Mind Guy Official as well. And some of the things that I run there is a Mind Mastery Club. I run a few different services, but to understand more of the connection between mind, body, and if you want to go further into spirit and a lot more into the tangibles and the intangibles, if you want to learn more about your brain, if you want to get better at doing things, if you want to understand more of consistency, control, and confidence for yourself to step into any of this with business or your own personal self, professional self, hit me a DM. You know, I'm always willing to catch up, talk, problem solve, you know, and for myself, the motivation comes from a level of service and a level of impact. And realizing that when you act from that core motivation for myself, there's no problem that isn't a conversation that I wouldn't be interested in. So definitely reach out to me on Instagram at the Mind Guy Official, where I'm most active.
We'll put all that in the show notes so people can have access to that and make sure they can find it there as well. What's something that you would ask of our audience? Our audience is full of action takers, but what could our audience do for you?
Beautiful. For me, you could do something for yourself. And what that would be ask yourself better quality questions before simply doing something. And before doing something, ask yourself, is there any way I can help myself do this better in this moment? And if there isn't an answer that comes to you directly, then promise yourself that you'll take at least 6 deep breaths, diaphragmatic breaths, to slow things down. And then ask yourself that question again to ascertain more certainty, more control for yourself. And by doing that, you know, you'll end up probably touching me, any of your listeners, indirectly from such and such an action. I mean, I'll probably get the repercussion of that. So the best way you could help myself is by helping yourself create more certainty each day. And how you can do that quite simply is take a breath, ask yourself a better question if you can, and then move forward.
So guys, as you move on with your day, whether you're listening in the car, whether you're listening during your workout, whether you're watching on YouTube in the background while you're working on your home office, it all comes down to being able to understand that stress is good. Stress puts us in the ability to perform, but knowing that it's just taking uncertainty and turning it into certainty, being able and willing to step in a little bit of discomfort to be able to optimize how we show up both mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, so that we can, again, sustain longer term high performance in not only our everyday lives, but at home and at the office. So with that, guys, stay hungry. You're going to have to edit that one out. With that, guys, stay hungry, stay humble, and we'll see you next week.